Our committee is charged with overseeing the administration of federal elections, and today's hearing will help us fulfill the responsibility by providing an opportunity to hear from the vendors of most of our country's voting systems. This is the first time the CEOs of the three major vendors have appeared together in a congressional hearing. The companies they represent provide at least 80% of the estimated 350,000 voting machines in use today, reaching over 100 million registered voters. However, despite their outsized role in the mechanics of our democracy, some have accused these companies of obfuscating and in some cases misleading election administrators and the American public. Others suggest there's an insufficient regulatory structure for this sector. In the committee's May 2019 hearing on election security, Lawrence Norden of the Brennan Center for Justice wrote in his testimony that, and I quote, "There are more federal regulations for ballpoint pens and magic markers than there are for voting systems and other parts of our election infrastructure. So there may be more work to do and much for Congress to learn about this industry." Many have concerns about voting systems with remote access software, and I think we want to make sure that companies no longer sell voting machines that have network capabilities. In 2019, according to a report in Motherboard, a group of election security experts, they uncovered that back-end election systems in at least 10 states were connected to the Internet, despite one company's claim that its systems were not. We need also to understand supply chains. In December 2019, a study released by Interos, a supply chain monitoring company, showed that 1/5 or 20% of the components in a popular voting machine came from China-based companies. Furthermore, close to 2/3, or actually 59%, of suppliers within that machine's supply chain had locations in either China or Russia. Interos didn't name the vendor that manufactured the voting machine, but said that it was widely used. I've also heard concerns about the ownership and control of voting machine vendors. Public reporting indicates that all three of the major voting system vendors represented here today are privately held or are partially controlled by private equity firms. I believe it's in the public interest for Congress to better understand who could financially benefit from the administration of our elections. There are also, of course, threats to our voting infrastructure. We learned in Special Counsel Mueller's report that Russian intelligence officers targeted employees of voting technology companies that developed software to manage voter rolls and installed malware on the company network. We also know that our own voluntary voting system guidelines have not been substantially updated since 2005, before the iPhone was even available. I'd like to talk about supply chains. As I mentioned in my opening statement, concern has been raised about components. The Interos report showed that a majority of suppliers within a widely used voting machine supply chain had locations in either Russia or China. They didn't indicate which company. So I'd like to ask each of you, do you have components in your supply chain that come from either Russia or China?
Chairperson, we do not have components that come from Russia. We do have a limited number of components that come from China.
What percentage would that be?
I can't give you a percentage, but with respect to this issue, the potential for a backdoor threat really doesn't pertain to inert items like a piece of plastic or a piece of metal. What we really should be concerned about are the programmable logic devices.
What type of components come from China? Can you tell me the nature of the components?
I'll give you one example. Our DS200, which is a precinct level test.
Well, no, I don't want examples. I want, do any of your chips, do your software, is it just a piece of plastic?
In our DS200, we have one of the 9 programmable logic devices that we actually source from a U.S. company based in Milpitas, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley, that produces that programmable logic device in a factory in China.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question. it wasn't our company in the Interisys report, but we do have components in our products that come from China. I don't know the exact percentage. I can certainly get that to the committee through my staff. Happy to work with you on getting the exact number. Our products, our tabulator products, have always been manufactured in the United States. And so if you look
before
at,
you go forward, what are the components that you get from China?
So, for example, LCD components, the actual glass screen on the interface, down to the chip component level of capacitors and resistors. Several of those components, to our knowledge, are not even, there's no option for manufacturing of those in the United States. We would welcome guidelines and best practices from the committee and from the federal government in terms of this is not a problem that's unique to the elections industry.
Thank you. Ms. Mathis?
Yes, similar feedback here. We take the security of our supply chain very seriously, and we actively monitor and assess all aspects of that supply chain, including country of origin.
So do you have components from China or Russia?
We do not have components from Russia, but we do have, similar to my colleagues, we do have components.
And what would be the nature of those components?
Similar resistors, capacitors, they're the global supply chain for technology components of that
Sure.
sort.
And what percentage do you know?
I don't have that.
We'll follow up with that.
Is there any method of voting that's 100% secure?
No.
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 To your knowledge, has a foreign state ever successfully breached or hacked any of your vote tallying election machines? Mr. Burt?
No.
Mr. Poulos?
No.
What then was the primary target of our foreign adversaries in the 2016 election? Mr. Burt?
Well, Ranking Member, I think there are potentially differing public views on that, but what I can say is that, as you asked a minute ago, we've seen no evidence that any of our voting systems have been tampered with in any way.
Mr. Poulos?
I would agree with that statement. We feel the same way. Can't speak to what the primary purpose was of the attacks, but there's, to our knowledge, no evidence on our systems as well. In addition, we do use Windows and Microsoft products that do have their own patches. That's not core to the tabulation product as well. We do not have off-the-shelf Windows.
I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that when Microsoft calls you and tells you you need to do this upgrade, you do it.
We implement it, we test it, we submit it for certification. We do not implement it, for example, in a county in Ohio until it is certified.
I'm not suggesting that you don't test it.
Okay.
My point is that you don't do it based upon what we believe is a security issue. You do it upon what Microsoft believes is one.
Right, okay.
You don't have to defend Microsoft. I'm not trying to do anything to Microsoft. I'm just making the point that we need to be more involved in the process.
Do you sell voting machines that have network capabilities installed?
Can you be more specific?
Yes, you don't have the software installed, but you have the capability of installing it.
For remote access software?
Yes.
We do not. We no longer install any remote access software. That process was discontinued in 2006 and is not allowed by any of the EAC testing.
Mr. Poulos?
Chairperson, we've never had any kind of remote access in our Dominion products. Capabilities. But okay. I will say that I do want to draw a caveat. Some of our tabulators have are designed around the ability to have an external plug-in modem to transmit unofficial results after polls close.
Okay.
So we do not have remote access capabilities, as you mentioned. So similar to Mr. Poulos, we have, as required by certain states, a remote transmission capability as an add-on.
So that's something that we may want to look at further.